Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the May 18, 2021 Grafton Select Board. As a preliminary matter, my name is Peter Carlson. I'll be the chair of the Select Board meeting tonight. Permit me please to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on this agenda are present and can hear me. Select Board members, when I please call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mr. Often.
Often is here.
Mr. Prisby.
Prisby here.
Ms. Roy.
Right here.
Carlson's here. Thank you. And those anticipated on the agenda and staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Town Administrator Evan Brassard.
Here.
All right. And Beth Shropshire.
Yes, here.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Town of Grafton Select Board. This meeting is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we've been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend all public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted to the town's website at www.grafton-ma.gov, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature any public comment for any public hearing. For this meeting, the Select Board is communing via Zoom and is posted on the town's website, identifying how you may join. Note that this meeting is being recorded and that this meeting is being recorded, and that please take aware that others may be able to see you, and also please take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All materials that have been provided to the members of this body are available on the town's website when final minutes are posted, unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I will note otherwise. Before we turn to our first item on the agenda, please permit me to cover some just basic ground rules for this meeting. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda tonight. After they conclude their remarks, I will go down the list of Select Board members, inviting each of you to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. If any votes are to be taken tonight, they will be done so by roll call. All right, thank you very much, everyone. I just have a couple of brief announcements. Just a reminder to everyone that town meeting will be held on June 5th at 11 a.m. on the Grafton High School athletic football field. The rain date in the event that June 5th is rained out will be June 6th at 11 a.m. Also, there's some details about the local election. The local election will be held this Saturday, May 22nd. Polls will be open from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Please note, precincts 1, 2, and 3 will vote at the Grafton Middle School located at 22 Providence Road. Precincts 4 and 5 will vote at the Millbury Street Elementary School located at 105 Millbury Street. Several boards and committees have membership terms due to expire on or about June 30th of 2021. If you're interested in serving on a board or committee, you may apply online or send a letter of interest to the Select Board at the Grafton Municipal Center, 30 Providence Road, Grafton, Mass. 01519 before May 28th of 2021. Recent news that you're probably all aware is that Governor Baker has made an announcement yesterday regarding the reopening of the state and lifting COVID-19 restrictions. He has set a date of May 29th as a day of when business can fully reopen and expects to lift the state of emergency on or about June 15th. As the board in the town, we are in the process of reviewing the guidelines issued as part of this announcement, and we'll be making our own announcement soon regarding the return to in-person meetings. So please stay tuned for that. And without further ado, let's turn to our first item of the agenda today. And up front here, we have a one-day beer and wine license. And let me just pull that up. 1 second. Does anyone need me to pull up the license? No? Okay. All right, so this is a one-day beer and wine license. Here we go. It took me a second. One-day beer and wine license applications to the Veteran Foreign Wars for the annual Memorial Day event. Just to let you know that this is something they do on an annual basis, and they are tip certified. I had forwarded to the board comments, direct comments from the chief of police, and he has no concerns for the board to consider for this and didn't have any objections to the license. Does any of the board members have any questions? If not, I can entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to approve the one-day beer and wine license for the Veterans of Foreign Wars Post 1497 on May 29th, 2021 for an event being held at 25 Main Street in South Grafton.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Often,
Often aye.
Mr. Prisby,
Frisbee, aye.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, I.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried. Thank you. Next up on our agenda, we have a common particulars license for Lakeview Pizza. From what I understood, this is just the establishment was sold from the father to his son, and they're just transferring the license. Is there any questions on the license from the board? No? Okay, I can entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to authorize a common victualer's license for Lakeview House of Pizza Incorporated effective immediately and set to expire on December 31st, 2021.
Second.
Motion made and seconded for the license. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Often,
Often aye.
Mr. Prisby,
Frisbee, aye.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, I.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried 4-0. Thank you. Next up on our agenda is that we have a refinancing of a condominium with the Mass Housing Authority unit deed restriction. Due to the deed restriction, the applicant for this is requiring that he needs a letter of support from the Grafton Select Board. Is there any questions on this action of the board tonight for the letter of support for the refinancing? All right, seeing none, I can entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to authorize the town administrator to send a letter of support for the refinancing of the affordable unit located at 5 Luca Drive, Grafton.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Often,
Often aye.
Mr. Prisby,
Frisbee, aye.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, I.
Carlson, I. Before we go to the next agenda, I'm going to hand this over to Ms. Roy. I need to recuse myself for this next vote.
So I'm willing to take a motion for anybody to accept or not accept the resignation of Mr. John Carlson as the animal inspector effective June 30th, 2021, and send him a letter of thanks.
I move we accept the resignation of John Carlson as animal inspector and send him a letter of thanks.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. I'm just going to amend it to include effective June 30th, 2021.
Fair enough.
Okay, so all by roll call, Mr. Often,
Often aye.
Ms. Frizzy,
Frisbee, aye.
Roy, I. All set, Matt, or Peter, you can come back.
Not like I went anywhere.
Thank God you're back, Peter. That was chaos.
All right. Thank you for that. Next up, we have in front of us tonight resignation for emergency management director.
I move the board vote to accept the resignation of Ray Mead as emergency management director effective immediately and send him a letter of thanks.
Second.
Motion made and seconded for the resignation of Mr. Mead. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Often,
Often aye.
Mr. Prisby,
Frisbee, aye.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, I.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried 4-0. Next up on our agenda, we have resignations for Conservation Commission.
I move the board vote to accept the resignation of Helen Cheney from the Conservation Commission effective immediately and send her a letter of thanks.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion of resignation? Seeing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Often,
Often aye.
Mr. Prisby,
Frisbee, aye.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, I.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried 4-0. Next up, we have TA appointments for Cemetery Parks Summer Laborer. Mr. Brassard put a memo together for us. Does anyone have any questions on this information? All right, seeing none, I can entertain a motion.
I move that the board vote to affirm the appointment of Joseph Matthew to the position of Cemetery and Parks Summer Laborer with the start date of June 7th, 2021.
Second.
Motion made and seconded for the appointment. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those by roll call, please. Mr. Often,
Often I.
Mr. Prisby,
Frisbee, aye.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, I.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried. All right, next up, we have 5 members to be appointed for the fire department. Attached is a letter from Mr. Brassard on this. Does anyone have any questions on the 5 firefighting recruits? Seeing none, I can entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to affirm the following individuals to the Grafton Fire Department as auxiliary firefighters recruits effective immediately and contingent upon successfully passing the firefighters pre-placement physical as well as attending and passing the MFFA recruiting and training. John Moran, Maximilian Cleveland, William DeRosa, Logan Donahue, and Chase Heck.
Second.
I have a motion made and seconded for the TA appointments for fire department. Any discussion on this motion?
Mr. Chair, I just want to say it's exciting that we have new recruits coming into the fire department. It's great news.
Agreed. Any other questions or comments from the board? All right, seeing none, I'll go by roll call, please. Mr. Often,
Often I.
Mr. Prisby,
Frisbee, aye.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, I.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried. All right, thank you for that. So moving on to new business, tonight we have Beth Shropshire here from Highfields Golf and Country Club in the John Henry Tavern. Beth is here tonight to seek an outdoor entertainment license. Good evening, Beth. How are you tonight?
Good. How are you all tonight?
Great. You want to give us a little bit of just background on what you're seeking tonight?
I guess since COVID, we are moving entertainment outside. So we always have a music license for inside for weddings or functions, but we didn't realize that we needed one for moving anybody outside. We usually have somebody once or twice a month from 5 to 8 p.m. I think we have one date scheduled for June, one date scheduled for July on the books. That's about it.
All right. All right. Any questions from the board on the outdoor entertainment license? Mr. Often. You're muted, Mr. Often.
Has to happen once a meeting. So we're asking businesses to comply with a standard set of hours for outdoor entertainment. So that would be
Okay.
noon to 8 Sunday through Wednesday, and then noon to 9 Thursday through Sunday. Through Saturday, sorry.
Through Saturday?
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions or comments from the board on the license? All right. Seeing none, I can entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to approve the 2021 emergency outdoor entertainment license for J&J Tavern located at Highfields Golf Country Club.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Often,
Often I.
Mr. Prisby,
Frisbee, aye.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, I.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried. All right, Beth, thanks for coming in tonight. Appreciate it. Good luck.
Thank
this
you all
summer.
so much. Have a great night.
You too.
Bye-bye.
All right. Next up, we have Select Board Annual Reappointment Policy. So this has come back to us just as a final amended policy for the board to adopt. Does anybody have any questions on this?
I do.
Mr. Prisby.
So the mechanics of reappointment, we have a few boards now that the interest in them is such that they've reached a place where new people aren't getting off unless somebody who is on there gets off. New people aren't getting on unless somebody else gets off. Number 2 on page 2 says the select board at its discretion may elect not to reappoint a member of a committee with an expiring term. Are we setting a timeline on that? So we're making people who are interested aware that they can now apply? You know what I'm saying? So FinCom has 9 people and one person, it's filled. One person has an expiring term. The select board's, actually FinCom's a bad example. Affordable Housing Trust. Affordable Housing Trust has 7 people, one expiring term. The select board can determine whether or not to reappoint that person, are we letting the outside world know in advance of June 30th, whether or not that person is going to be reappointed, such that a new person, if they were interested, could get on?
I think we've already started doing that. I've seen a social media post listing a lot of committees with openings already floating out there.
Right. So I guess then the answer to my question is we're going to advertise these positions as though they are vacant. And then the select board will make a determination at its discretion about whether or not to reappoint the re-upping person.
Yeah, Mr. Prisby, if I understood it, if I was on CIPC, right, and my term was up this year and someone, let's say 5 other people had an interest in serving on CIPC, it's the board's discretion, right?
Except CIPC doesn't have any terms that expire.
All right, bad
Right,
example.
but the point is still valid. We want to have the opportunity for each of the boards and committees to take any members that have expiring terms, whether they want to express interest to keep on or not, to advertise those out, see what the pool of candidates look like, and make our decision as to whether we want to reappoint or not.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yep.
All right. Great. Any other? Yeah, Mr. Brasher?
The only thing that's come up since you last met that has to do with this policy is if you have a vacancy, let's say the animal inspector resigns and you want to post that, you have to put that by your policy in the newspaper, which costs like $65 every time we do it. So one of the problems that I'm starting to foresee, and this just came up in the last couple of days, is, you're going to have $65. It's going to add up because we're not saving them up and doing one ad at every 2 weeks or
Right.
1 month or whatever it is. So is that something that the board wants to take into account? Do we want to do just electronic postings?
I would like to see just electronic postings and any print postings be once a quarter. And I say that because I know I've seen that written somewhere in another policy. And we previously weren't following it either, but it was somewhere in some policy that I've seen where print only needed to be once a quarter and we were already doing it more than we needed to.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the board? So, Mr. Brasher, these are committee appointments. Like the animal inspector position is it appointed by the town administrator?
Of course it is. Let's just keep picking the worst example possible.
All right. Does anyone have any questions or comments on the policy? We're good tonight. No? Okay. I want to thank Mr. Brasser and board. I know we really, poured a lot of time over this. Thank you everyone for your patience. Your guidance, Evan, on this has been great. Thank you. If there isn't any questions or comments, I can entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to accept the annual reappointment policy as presented.
Second.
I have a motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion?
Just so, should we make the amendment that was proposed?
Yep, I just read it too quick, so thanks for doing that.
So we vote to accept as amended.
Okay. So I withdraw my motion and I'll make it again.
Okay.
I move the board vote to accept the annual reappointment policy as amended.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Often,
Often aye.
Mr. Prisby,
Frisbee, aye.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, aye.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried 4-0. All right, real quick. So let's start off with select board member reports. I want to hand this over to Mr. Prisby. He had a couple of items that he did send to me last week, and through my own fault and admission, it did not make it on the agenda, but he did send it to me in time. But I wanted to hand this over to him. There were 2 items on here that he would like to discuss. Mr. Prisby, we'll give you the floor.
Sure. Just, I guess, taking these in order. Number one, one of the reasons why I ended up getting on this board, or at least running for the position to begin with, was because I felt like there needed to be a more collaborative approach to some of our data-driven stuff. In particular, I wanted to see the administration come up with projections both prior to the presentation of the budget at town meeting in the spring, and then maybe something again come 6 months later in cooperation with the finance committee and the school committee. And the reason being was, after we passed the override back in 2014, a lot of people felt like we had solved some kind of problem by doing that. And really we hadn't. And we were always on a timeline to our second override, just like we're on a timeline right now to potentially our third if the voters decide to do that. And what we were doing was, I thought at the time, giving Grafton residents a rosier expectation of revenues than they deserved. And we were doing that by, I think, overestimating new growth and underestimating certain spending, and in particular, underestimating school spending, without really taking into account what the school department might have felt about that. So, we sort of got off track with that over the course of the past year. A couple of things happened. COVID happened, and we changed administrations. And, and I say this without any disrespect to Cutter Terenzini, who I thought did a wonderful job. But, when you're operating with an interim town administrator or a temporary town administrator, it's a little bit like driving your car with a spare tire. It'll get you from point A to point B, but it's not even going to come close to doing the speed limit. And it's certainly not going to do anything new for you. So, it's unfortunate that, Evan, I've had as little time as I had to work with you, but I did want to bring up the idea that this administration probably, with the finance director that we do have now, probably ought to start working with the school finance director and the finance committee to form some kind of mini TRICOM. And we've had this over the years. We have our TRICOM committee meetings, which is a little bit different than what I'm talking about. But a while back, there was such a thing, I believe, as a TRICOM that held annual meetings to discuss, the data concerning, projections and spending increases. I think that's going to help. I think that sort of thing would help on a number of levels. I think it would help with public outreach. I think it would help with public understanding. I think it also would help with expectations with bargaining units about what compensation can and should be. That combined with, annual benchmarking. So, we hadn't talked about it in a year. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about it because, in all candor, I bashed the former TA over the head with it on multiple occasions. It just wasn't up to par. We are now where we were back in 2015, 2016. We passed an override. We have levy capacity. We're a little bit comfortable right now. Now is the time to start thinking about the future rather than letting it come to us again, and sort of learn some of the mistakes that we made, or learn from some of the mistakes that we made over the course of the past 10 years. So I wanted to bring it up just as a discussion item, and hope that this group takes it up again in the months to come.
Mr. Hoffman.
Mr. Prisby, thanks for bringing that up. I'll just call you Ed. How about that for the last meeting? Look, I'm not comfortable. No one in town should be comfortable. Nobody in the administration should be comfortable. But we should also be candid and honest about the fact that we had a plan when we had, the last TRICOM meeting together, which agreed on this override number, that it was 4 or 5 years. That's a plan to have 5 years, 4 to 5 years of levy capacity. And at that point, we've got to go and ask the voters again, do you want to maintain level services? That's going to require another override. So, I think we need to be with good projections that are sort of fully vetted across the select board and the finance committee and the schools. We'll be in a better shape, we'll be in much better shape to have a conversation in 4 years, or, I guess it's 4 years at this point, right? We're a year into it already. It goes fast, goes really fast. So I think as long as we're having those conversations, I would support the idea, and we can continue this discussion of having a working group to put those projections together, to continue examining, what those bargaining unit discussions should be, so that we're level setting across the different units and not pitting them against each other, which can happen for sure. So, I'm on board with the idea of it for sure. We definitely need to give Mary a minute to get through this budget process and have an opportunity to really examine some of the assumptions that we've had in the past. And there's a lot of complexities. I think there's some moving parts in the budget that, you know, Mary has come in and she's looking at, and things were done a little bit different than she necessarily would do herself. So there's a bit of style with budgeting, and I think she's got to get through all of that. But I welcome with open arms the discussion about what those projections look like. And before we go too far from our override, I think we need to revisit some of the assumptions that we made in those original discussions. Particularly on the school side, they had some very they had some ambitious numbers in terms of optimizing special education and other things. We should be taking a look at those, and, you know, COVID's changed a lot of different things now. So we should be looking back at those and saying, are they still valid? If they're not, we should change them and put those into the projections for sure.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And, you know, one of the issues is, and we ran into this with the past group, is, well, we have these projections and, you know, they said what they said. But, you know, projections are just based on, you know, the hopes and reasonable expectations that people have about spending and staffing needs. And certainly, you know, those things have been in flux lately, and those projections are greatly dependent on outside forces that we really don't have a whole lot of control over. New growth is one of them. You know, needs in certain departments that are responding to the environment around them are another. And, you know, they might not change on a 6 month to 6 month basis, but certainly over a course of a year, and almost definitely over the course of 5 years. You know, the world that we're living in right now is in municipal government is different than the one we were living in 2016 even. And who knows where things are going after we all get back to normal, whatever it is that's going to look like. And, you know, and what you just said speaks to a little bit of why the GSC stalled a bit. It was because it was really hard to, I think, try and pin down what the operations of a municipal government look like on a day-to-day basis when you've had 3 different styles of leadership in the span of 12 months. You really couldn't do it. You know, it was sort of a futile effort and wasn't going to yield any fruit. You know, I hope that effort continues in the future, because, you know how it goes. We all talk about the projections, and we have conversations with Evan and we have conversations with Jay, and we're fairly well informed about what the expenditures are and why they are, and we're fairly well informed about what the income is and why certain new growth development does or does not pan out. But most people, they don't have that, you know, and even if they wanted to have it, they would have a hard time finding it. So it's, you know, part of it is a numbers game. The other part of it is a political and PR game, where, you know, part of having regular projections is just getting that message out. Like, this is where we are. This is what we think is going to happen. So when it does happen, or something that you don't like does happen, please know that this information has been there all along. And the outcome that you're facing right now is as a result of the choices that we made going along to provide you with X amount of services that you seem to be happy with. In fact, that you seem to want more of each and every year. You know, there aren't very many people that ask for less from town government on a year-to-year basis. It's always a little bit more.
All right, Mr. Brassard.
All right, thank you. Before I start, if there's odd background noise, my 4-year-old seems to have found a whistle. So I can't imagine where it came from, but I'm just letting you know now, if there's a hooting sound, that's what it is. So no, I agree 100%, Ed. And one of the things that you really can't develop a budget without knowing where you're going to be in 2 to 3 years, because all you're doing at that point is picking an arbitrary number, and you're probably just hitting your capacity, and that's it. And you just do that year over year. But that capacity is going to fluctuate. Things are going to change. There will be unforeseen things, recessions, housing market changes, all these other things that are going to factor into this. But you should be able to create a pretty good 5-year estimate that should show you where you would be if things remain the same, right? And then what you do is you take that number and you create a variance. And you some of that is a little subjective. Maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 20%. But you give yourself the ability to say, okay, we're going to be somewhere in this range. I'm not going to tell you this one number, but we're going to be in here. And if we're in here, what does that mean? Because, you know, if things keep going the way that they're going, you could potentially get 7 years out of that override, right? New growth is strong, all these other things come into place. But the housing market tanks and people want to, keep level services. Well, now the capacity's gone like that. And now it's a 3-year override. And will there be appetite to have any conversation after that? So I think that both Mary and my style, and unfortunately, we only got to work together for a short time, but if you watch the budget process in its entirety next year, it starts with the projection of this is what we have, here's where we think we're going to be. So we're not going to eat up that entire capacity every single year, so that instantly when something happens, it's a cut in service. You've got to plan for that a little bit. There'll be years where you do hit capacity because that buffer, you're kind of playing the market a little bit, right? There's some guesswork there, but I think it's extremely important to have. And I think you'll see a lot more of that, both at this level and the finance committee discussions too. And the last thing I'll say, I have started conversations with Jay. I think we're going to try to do a monthly roundtable with Anita, myself, Mary, and Jay, as I said, to be talking about these things on a monthly basis, so that we're all on the same page. There's no surprises. And when we go to the finance committee, or we go to the board of selectmen, or we go to school committee, we're having the same conversation. Nothing jumps up and catches anybody unaware. So I think that'll be helpful in the budget process as well.
Any other questions or comments on that, Mr. Prisby?
Nope, I'm good.
No, I want to say I agree with you. This is a discussion I think, that needs to be ongoing. I think, now that things are stabling up quite a bit, and I think even from our town administration side of things, and then as we get back to more in-person meetings, I'm looking forward to these discussions. I think having them in person too are going to be beneficial, and having those key stakeholders, in the same room. So good point. You had one other thing, Mr. Prisby, that you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, and this is a little bit more, it's a little bit more wonky, and it may be something that you see for me as a citizen petition later on, but there is such a thing in the country as a local option income tax. And I think it's sort of difficult to spring it on, the board in this context, and, a selectman's report, at the end of a term. But about a year ago, Tim and I had been talking about presenting an idea called a local option income tax, maybe a little longer than that. It might have been 18 months ago. And the reason being was, he and I didn't see eye to eye on much, but we both agreed that the state wasn't meeting its obligations to our local finance. And that, without an additional income tax, or without an additional income source, what you'd be looking at is just heavier and heavier reliance on real estate taxes, which I hope that people agree with me is a really regressive way to raise money for the services that we need. It puts the burden most heavily on people with fixed incomes and people who are on the lower end of the income spectrum. So there are states out there, Ohio is one of them, there are a few others that have a local option income tax. And we had prepared about a year ago a resolution to ask, I think, or to work with our state delegation to explore the idea of a local option income tax. And that was tabled at the last minute and never revisited. Again, I think it was right before COVID. It was right before the override. It was right before the election, and then right before everything else. So it never came back. But it is something that I just kind of wanted to mention and put a bug in people's ear. If and when this board decides to, make a determination that really we can't rely on state aid to be what it was around 2002, to be upwards of a quarter of our budget, and really we're not sure if we want to rely anymore on residential real estate taxes to cover the gap. And if you decide that you want to fight a really uphill battle with very little chance of success, then a local option income tax would be something that you would consider petitioning your state delegation for. I like our state delegation. I think they're two nice fellows, but I also know how much work that we put into this. And I think that they ought to work for it a little more than, showing up to town meeting and saying, yep, we got you $99,000 more this year and receiving a round of applause, with people forgetting that our budget is $60 million. I think that's something, it would require a lot of politics, a lot of political maneuvering. It would be not unlike asking the state to repeal or amend Proposition 2.5. But I'm telling you, either we take on those big fights, not just as Grafton, but as municipalities around Massachusetts as a whole, or you've entered the era of perpetual overrides, or you've entered the era of declining services. But we can't keep doing what we've been doing for the past 50 years. It's just not going to work anymore. It's no coincidence that, this town went 32 years without passing an override and had 2 and 6 years, potentially 3 and 11 years. And then, neighboring Shrewsbury just did the same thing. They passed one in 2014. They just did another one in 2021. So, it's happening. And I don't think there's any avoiding it, because it's basic math. Everybody wants a little bit more from the town government every year. The services cost a little bit more, and we're fighting over less and less money, and eventually you're going to need more income. So this was just one. It was just one idea. I would encourage people just to read about it, look into it in case it comes up again in the future.
Yeah, if I may comment on that, Mr. President, I remember that I was on the board at the time, and we had a really good discussion at one of the workshops and meetings, if I recall. I think I would like to put it on our future agenda. I'd like the board just to see what the resolution was about. Maybe we'll put it in a workshop in the July timeframe. But I do think it's worthwhile that this board consider, because I agree with Mr. Prisby. We have to fix one thing or the other. And if we sit back, on our heels and, let it slip by, then to his point, we're always going to be looking at perpetual override after override. And there's more and more communities that are falling into that. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Ms. Roy?
For that workshop in July, Peter, is there a way we can get Mr. Meridian or Mr. Moore in as well, to see if they maybe have other municipalities that might want to sign on this resolution with us, so it carries a little more weight?
So the resolution's in a draft form. I would agree that I would like to bring them in so we can discuss it with them. I was thinking maybe if the board would consider an August timeframe for them to come in, because it gives us an opportunity to discuss it in July, understand it, ask questions, and then if we vote and propose it, then we can propose it to our state senator and our state rep to that point. But there's nothing wrong with inviting them. But I was just kind of envisioning that we would have our discussion first, and then we would ratify it if that's what we wanted to do, and then we would propose it to them.
That works too, or maybe bring them to both and have them find us support from July to August. And when they come back in August, they can say, yeah, all these other communities want to sign on too. Awesome.
All right. Okay. All right. I'll send out some feelers and some invites for Mr. Moore and Mr. Meridian. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Just one, I guess. Yeah, the perpetual overrides, even, we're going to work on local income, option tax, or potentially, some alterations to 2.5 override. If you go to 3.5 override, you're still sort of penalizing the wrong people when you've got to increase services. It's, so even if we choose a different threshold, because 2.5% is pretty arbitrary. I understand the intent of it, but putting tax caps on like that, have some unintended consequences, I think, that we're now living in. So yeah, I'd be interested in the topic. I do think it's a pretty steep uphill battle that we'd be looking at to try to make some changes at the state level, but it definitely worth our time, I think. And yeah, if we could get some other towns to sign on, that's how things happen.
All right. Great. All right. Thank you. All right. Does anyone else have any other select board member reports? No. I just want to remind everyone that we have a meeting next Thursday. This will be like for town meeting logistics. We'll be meeting with Finance Committee, Town Administration, and we'll be discussing just following Saturday for town meeting. Just a reminder for that. And then we will have our first meeting, regular business meeting on June 1st. Okay, let me see here. Do we have any TA reports?
Sure, I have just a couple quick ones. Just want to let everybody know I've been meeting. We met with Finance Committee last week. They approved our final budget numbers. And we'll be meeting with them twice this week, and I think once the following week for the public hearings for the warrant recommendations. And then we'll be off to town meeting. So it's all coming together pretty well. I think we've got a pretty solid budget. We're much more confident in it now than we were 2 months ago, which is great. And Finance Committee seemed very supportive and excited about the way it came together. So that was really great. And then one other thing I just want to talk about briefly is the library. So Mr. Chairman, do you mind if I share my screen for just a sec?
Go right ahead.
So they've been working on flooring and stuff, and I thought this was pretty cool. So this is the entryway when you come in, and this tile in the middle, this gray, is actually the tile from the other building, the original. So they were able to carry that through in the design, which I always think things like that are neat. So I just thought I would share that with you. I think that's a pretty nice design element. There's more of these throughout this little area. But this is kind of the best picture that we have of that. So that project seems to be on track for that June 8th as well. So we're moving in the right direction.
Any questions for Mr. Brassard?
Good.
All right. I know we've got some other things, but I don't think we have an update on the Upton Street RFP. We're still waiting for town meeting. Milbury Street and Milford Road sidewalk grant. There's no updates for that, Mr. Brassard?
Not since we last met, no. It's
Okay.
all in process, but nothing to report.
Okay. All right, moving on, if there's no questions, just real quick, just acknowledge we had a couple of correspondences come through. Does anyone have any questions or comments on that?
Oh, I have one thing. I do want to acknowledge before I go, the trash bags. It's not my thing. Everybody has their thing here in the community. It typically is more Doreen's thing. I do want people to know that they've been heard about the trash bags. I buy them too. They're awful. They're awful trash bags, and they're expensive and awful. And it feels insulting to people. But I assure you, nobody is trying to actually insult you with the trash bags. The simple fact of the matter is there's only so many people that make them. And so we're at the whim of the people who do. And I guess it sort of goes to show you that markets are irrational, because if there's a rational market, somebody else would come out and just simply make a quality trash bag that every municipality in Massachusetts would buy, but they don't. So we're sort of stuck with this. I mean, at this point, I don't have a dog in this race. I see, the former administration had a problem with the stickers on the bags. I guess I get the point, but at this point, it's so awful with these bags that I would be willing to try just about anything except the town dump. Don't make me do that. I work 12 hours a day. I don't want to drive down the street and spend my Saturday throwing stuff in the trash. Please don't make me do that. That's my only thing about the correspondence.
Any question, Mr. Brassard?
Just because I deal with trash bags a lot. And so you're right. There's some definite quality control issues there. I have been speaking with the folks at Waste Zero. I did have a couple residents call and complain and said that in their former towns, the trash bags were much better. I reached out to the former towns. They use the same company we do. They have the exact same bags. So I think that there's some quality control issues that are going on now that I'm hopeful we're able to resolve, because you're right, Ed, there are a very limited number of vendors that do this type of municipal supply, product placement. So we are working on it. We want people to definitely reach out to Wake Zero, which is the number we provided. Any calls we get, we're reporting them as well. And we have to stay on top of it. If anyone wants to have conversations about stickers, different ways to do it, I'm more than happy to have that conversation with BJ Harvey and try to come up with a better solution. But I did have quite a number of calls through other towns that use the same bags as we do, and we're all living the same nightmare.
Is there any way we can add a link right on the front of our website to make it easier for people to report when their bags fail? That's the next step. Is we tell people, oh, just call it in, you'll get it replaced, but it almost seems too difficult when they're already really mad. So if we can make it as easy as possible, click this link, here's your number, here's the email, here's something that will get it to you immediately, just to simplify the replacement process.
We can most certainly do that, yes.
Could we just make it a simple see, click, fix option in the app too? I don't know if that's simple.
I don't know either, but I will look into that. And if I do not, by tomorrow morning when Joanne watches this meeting, she will make me do that. So that's really good.
I at some point I'd like to talk about the stickers. I'd like to hear why we wouldn't do that. Because to me, even if you've got a little bit of counterfeiting or whatever, you build that into your pricing and you move on. And you do the best you can to police it, but then we're not having this constant frustration. So, I haven't thoroughly investigated all these options, but that's definitely an option I'd like to hear about.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments from the correspondence? Just want to make mention, if you got comments for Conservation Commission, a recommendation of the acceptance of 4 Millennial Drive, that property that Worcester Development Business Corporation wants to donate 19 acres. Please make sure we get that to them. If it isn't too late. All right. That's all I have. All right. Next up, I've got, there's no discussion tonight. We have meeting minutes for April 6, 2021.
I move the board vote to accept the meeting minutes from April 6, 2021 as presented.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve meeting minutes. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Often?
Often aye.
Mr. Prisby?
Yeah.
Roy?
Roy, aye.
Carlson, aye. The motion carried. Before we adjourn, I just want to take a moment and I want to personally thank Mr. Prisby for his 3 years of service and his countless years of service before being on the select board. 3 very, very contentious, difficult years on finance committee, affordable housing trusts. The advocacy that you have put forth in there, I think speaks volumes for not only we as a community, but for the future residents who may seek to want to live in Grafton. I believe everyone who serves on this board puts forth a good effort. They mean well, they do well, they're passionate, they have a desire to want to serve and make things better. Where we may not always agree, or amongst us other board members, I do genuinely respected your time on this board. I thoroughly enjoyed serving 2 years with you on the board. This is the first time I've got to serve with you on a board, believe it or not. And I am going to miss you. I'm going to miss the discussion. You make me think. Your comments are profound. Sometimes they're loud, but sometimes that's necessary for us to hear it and listen. But I will miss you, Mr. Prisby. Ed, thank you very much for your years. I hope you get some time back on your Tuesdays for your family. I'm sure your kids will appreciate it, as well as Nicole, in that we wish you all the best. Matt?
Yeah, that's tough to follow up, but yeah, look, Ed, thanks so much for all of your, years of hard work and dedication to serving the town. I said it online earlier and I can't say it enough. Your influence and your impact on town politics, how we think about things, the discussions that we've had have been absolutely immeasurable. So yeah, it's been a real pleasure working with you. And on the board or off the board, I know that you're going to keep us on our toes. So I look forward to that.
Thank you.
Well, that's hard to do after those two. I also want to say thank you very much for all of your years of service. And it's really hard to articulate how much you've helped me grow in Grafton, which is why I usually look to you to do that for me. So it's going to be a real loss not having you on the board anymore. Thank you.
Just give me 1 second.
Okay. On that moment.
It's been a lot of fun. I always wanted to serve my community. Community service is important to me. It hasn't always been easy, but then it's not supposed to be. If it were easy, everybody would do it, right? So thank you guys. It's been, a really fun year. It's been hard, but it's also been really worthwhile. I wouldn't have done all this if it wasn't worthwhile. I would have stopped doing it a long time ago. I guess, I do want to leave you with this. Continue to challenge yourselves. This is a very, very talented board. Ray is a talented guy. Matt, Peter, obviously I've known you guys for a decade, and I came to know you through community service. It's not like we were friends before, and I thought it would be fun if my friends were on the board. I got to know you guys through community service. Doreen, she and I don't agree a lot, but she's a talent. And, this year Colleen has been, I think, one of the intellectual engines that makes the whole operation run. When I started getting involved, the guys who were on these committees had been involved for a long time, and they themselves were the ones who displaced older people, with whom they disagreed. And, just as we sort of ended up, I think, displacing them. And the danger, I think, that you get into if you do this long enough, is you start to gain this sort of pride of authorship and a feeling like things are the way they are because I want them to be this way. And this is what the community responds to. And so this is what's going to happen. Just my request is please don't fall into that trap. If I were to wish anything for you guys, it would be that next year, either Colleen or Doreen would be chair, just to shake up some roles. Colleen shouldn't be pigeonholed into the person that's always pushing the board. Pete shouldn't be pigeonholed into the person that's always mediating and dispute. Doreen shouldn't be pigeonholed into the person that, is sort of on the outside saying, what about this over here? Just continue to challenge yourselves. And in that way, I think the board will avoid, some of the, maybe some of the pitfalls I think that it encountered previously. It ain't, the stuff isn't easy. I don't like to be told no either. I don't like to be disagreed with a whole lot either. But, if we're going to come to the right decision, and I don't think any of us would say that we're the final arbiters of what is all good and right in the world, then we need to challenge ourselves. So best of luck to you guys. Best of luck to the town of Grafton. Your success is our success. Your community is our community. So the better that you guys do, the better we all do. And I think we're going to be in fantastic hands, and I think that for the first time in a long time. So thank you guys very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, Ed. Ed, I'll entertain a motion.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Motion made, second. All those by roll call. Mr. Often.
Often aye.
Mr. Prisby.
Yeah.
Ms. Roy.
Roy, aye.
Carlson's aye. Claire, adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great evening. We'll see you next Thursday.